I'm zonked.
Yeah, dude, I feel like garbage.
Yeah, I'm tired.
Did you nap or anything?
No, but I was watching some WWE and was like dozing while I was watching it.
Dude, and I slept a little bit on the car ride, and I
Yeah.
still feel like
Jake said he just woke up too.
Nashville 1, the boys 0.
That's accurate.
And it don't matter what you go there for. Like this is with any trip, Dom. We went to Bellator in Chicago. And it was like the next day you get home and you're like, why am I limping around the house?
Yeah.
Why does it take an extra second to get up off the bed? Because my back feels like it's about to break in half.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a sign of aging, Dominic.
Aging.
There's been a lot of signs this weekend.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That's a little inside joke, but the aging in particular has become quite a humbling experience. Tie that in with our buddy Jacob, who I've always been, I'm 2 years older than him, but I've always been tight with him back from when, God, I was like 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been used to being like, I could, squash this fucker in a second. So what a humbling experience it was that after a couple years of jiu-jitsu, this dude manhandled me around the room.
I cannot confirm or deny that claim.
And when he had me in mount, I just couldn't move him. I'm like, wow, this is definitely a wake-up call that like you ain't the biggest fish in the sea, or you might be, but you ain't the strongest.
You earned the war hat this weekend, Noah. That's what happened.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA show. We are back from Nashville is where we were this weekend. We got to see Fight Night Sandhagen versus Font in front of the upwards of 20,000 others at Bridgestone Arena. Dominic, we literally just got back a couple hours ago. Overall, thoughts on the trip, things you liked, things you didn't, about everything we did, about the arena, just obviously not getting too much into the fights yet, but just overall, how was the trip to Nashville? What'd you think?
It was a great trip. Shout out to Jake being our driver this weekend, kept us safe, got us to and from. Nice hotel, nice convenient walk to Broadway and to Bridgestone. It was kind of a perfect storm. And obviously we got to see the fight Saturday, but we got to go out Friday, got to go out after the fight Saturday. It was a very good time, quality time with your best friends. There's not much more that is better than that. And we get to recap it all here. How was it? No, I know you probably feel much the same as me, except maybe a little bit more sore due to the jiu-jitsu class.
Yeah. I don't even know if that's what made me sore the most or if it was those amaretto sours I was drinking last night. People, it's just you realize like everybody talks about in their 30s, they hit that point where like the hangovers hit different and it's a lot harder. I'm 25. I'm already feeling that. So this is not a good sign of what's to come in my future. But it was a great trip. It's great to spend it with a couple of my best friends. Jake, let's just call it what it is, Dom. He drives like a fucking maniac. But he does it for the sake of getting us there faster, which I appreciate.
Sure.
Was I nervous a few times? Yes. Now, you have to realize when I'm saying he drives like a maniac, this is in comparison to me, who drives, if it's 70 is the speed limit, I'm going, a high speed of like 73.
73.
I fully admit, and see if my dog agreed with me. It just barked, but it doesn't take, when you get a little faster than that, it starts getting a little uneasy. But I do
grabbing
appreciate
the seat.
Driving. He got us there quick, efficient. Definitely had me nervous a few times. But we got there in one piece, there and back. So
yes,
shout out to him. The bars were good. Broadway, very fun. A lot of long lines.
Yes.
The battle was truly to find the bars that did not have the weights.
And guys, Saturday night, the fights ended right around 11 Nashville time, which is perfect time to go out. And all of those thousands of people that you got to see on TV all went out the same door onto Broadway. It was quite a crazy thing to witness.
I'm just imagining people that were at Broadway before the fights were over. They're like, huh, it feels like kind of a light day here,
Yeah,
like for
yeah.
compared to what we're used to. And then they just see a mob coming of horde of like a zombie horde coming down the street. And they're like, holy shit, everybody run to the bar you want to go to.
Yeah,
Because if
go
not, you're
now.
waiting about an hour or two to get in anywhere.
Yes.
But yeah, the arena itself, small ass seats for this big ass guy.
Mm.
It's just, it's an element. It's an element to this game for me. But we made it work. Yeah. So I think with that, Dominic, we'll just get straight into our episode today. But first, I want to let everybody know this is the last time, if you're watching this on YouTube,
Last call.
that you will be seeing full length podcast episodes.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to continue receiving content in this kind of form, you'll need to go follow us on Spotify, on Apple, any audio platform that you will listen. That's where you need to be following us at if you want the long content. If not, don't worry. We got you covered here on YouTube. Basically, moving forward, you'll see it kind of today. When we talk about the main event, imagine that main event discussion was just its own video.
Yep.
And it gives us the ability to be more timely with our uploads. If there's big news drops or whatever, Dana White, with his little Instagram videos he likes to do, we can get a video out the next day, let everybody know what's going on, and be more timely with it. Not have to wait till that next scheduled recording day. However, if you do want the long form content, still expect to get those drops on Fridays and Mondays. Also follow us on social media at the BAJ MMA on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. TikTok doing the MMA trivia, which has been a lot of fun. Me and Dominic are not we're not giving each other softballs here, so it's definitely challenging. So I highly recommend to go through those if you would like to see how you hold up as a hardcore MMA fan. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, Dominic. Anything else I need to cover? Blazing Bets will live on Twitter, by the way. Maybe you should mention that. So make sure you're following us on all those if you want to get extra content.
Perfect.
Main event, Dominic. Cory Sandhagen gets the unanimous decision win over Rob Font. It wasn't even close. Sandhagen dominated from bell to bell.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in the fashion that I think many would have expected. He did it with the wrestling. Really a performance that, while dominant, while one-sided, showed there's levels to this game, whatever you want to say, it seems to have been very controversial, I think is the word. Big reason for that, the fight wasn't very good at all. It was very boring. A lot of people may describe this Sandhagen performance as being lay and pray. Not a whole lot of damage being inflicted. It was mostly takedowns and top control. That's really what you saw for the majority of the 25 minutes. I think Dominic told me 25-minute fight. He had over 20 minutes of control time in that fight, which is crazy. Afterwards, while being interviewed in the cage, he said that he had been dealing with a lot of elbow injuries or an elbow issue during camp. And then he thinks he might have tore his tricep in the first round, which obviously sucks. And then we saw the video today, Dominic, that he posted to Twitter where something definitely looks injured there.
Yeah.
I'm no doctor, but I don't think it's supposed to have been that way.
Yeah.
So now you're seeing a lot of outcry on social media for some fans that are not happy with this performance, either some of those that were in attendance like us in Nashville who bought the tickets, felt like they didn't get their money's worth in that main event, or those watching at home. It seems like a lot of question has been brought into, Cory Sandhagen needs to have to take a fight with a lesser opponent, or he needs to be out of the title mix, or people are even saying the guy needs to be cut.
Man.
So obviously a lot of it's a very controversial fight here in a lot of ways. So I guess, Dominic, how do you evaluate this performance? Being that we were in attendance, I'm curious, do you hold a little bit of like resentment to that fight for kind of for a crowd that was so ready to explode with just a great main event, instead became, the house that Booze built. And I just want to know, like, where your feelings kind of lie on everything that went down in that main event.
Yeah, so obviously, as people who had purchased tickets to be in the arena, that's not the main event that you want to see. This was our
Mm,
fourth event that we've been to, and definitely the worst main event. But it doesn't ruin the experience for me. It doesn't ruin the entire rest of the 11 other fights that happened that night. It sucks because it was two very high level guys that we expected to have a very fun fight one way or another, and we did not get that. But if you really are a hater on Cory Sandhagen from one fight, I think that's I think that's a bit too soon to do that. Just go
mhm.
look at his last 7 fights and go find me another boring one. I'll save you the time and say you won't be able to do that. He is never in fights like this. And when you add in that elbow injury, that's very obvious to something is not normal there, and that it happened in that first round, which was a very fun round. I enjoyed that first round. It kind of makes a little bit more sense. I'm not making excuses for the guy, but I mean, if you can have one bad fight, and I think you should still have your fans. So yeah, it sucked in a way because the fight was just not what we wanted. But I'm not going to come on here and hate on Sandhagen. People should not be going after Sandhagen. This is his third straight win. He did what he had to do to win, and at the end of the day, that's what these guys are paid to do. They go in to win. So it is what it is. Give me your thoughts.
You shouldn't have to feel like you're making excuses for him, because there should be no need. The man dominated this fight.
Yeah.
He had no reason to risk his position in the division, to risk uh, obviously being finished, maybe injuring himself worse. He had no reason to do it because Rob Font did not force him to do that. Rob
Mm,
Font could not stop a single takedown here. I think Sandhagen went 7-7 on his takedown attempts. And that doesn't mean I want everybody to shift their focus to being mad at Rob Font. Rob Font stepped up and took this fight on 2 weeks' notice.
yeah.
Obviously, Cory has to agree to a new opponent on 2 weeks' notice. Font was preparing for a fight in Boston, which was 2 weeks later from when we're recording this. Cory was preparing for Umar Nurmagomedov,
Mm-hmm.
completely different fighter than Rob Font. I think that I understand people being upset that we're in attendance, that paid a lot
Of
of money
course.
to watch. I understand not being happy with the main event. Dana White even walked out in the
Mm-hmm.
fourth round of this fight. Never a good sign. But I think to say anything more than, I don't like this fight and this fight sucked, is honestly like I'm not on that side. I'm not
Yeah.
on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
Cory Sandhagen is an exceptional fighter, one of the best bantamweights in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and he's constantly delivered great, high-paced action fights. However, I mean, this is again, I take a lot of good out of this performance, if in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's tough because you want to. It's not a style. This performance style will not work against too many more guys above
Yeah.
Rob Font.
Yeah.
You give him a pass, right? You kind of go, okay, the injury probably would show a little. He'd show a little bit more, if he didn't have that. But he is a real threat in the wrestling department in this
Yeah.
division at this point. To see the how far he's come.
His game. Yeah.
He's become one of the most well-rounded guys in the whole division, and I have to applaud him for that. That's just sort of how I feel about the whole thing. Um, again, I understand some people are just gonna be mad, and that's fine. You can be mad,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think, to say that Cory, you lose respect for him,
Yeah.
or that he should be cut and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, are these tweets that people are really going to stand by in a couple weeks from now,
Yeah.
or is this going to be the stuff that people woke up the next day and was like, oh God?
Why did I say
It's
that?
you ever heard of post nut clarity? This is post sleep
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on. But let me ask you about what this means for his standing in the division, because we kind of looked at this fight, Dominic, going in and said title implications are on the line here.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks from now, you have Aljamain Sterling defending against Sean O'Malley. Sterling has basically said, win or lose, he's probably going up to featherweight.
Yeah.
If Sean O'Malley wins, you have the options of Merab, you have Cory Sandhagen, maybe a rematch with Aljo, but I tend to believe Aljo would just move on up. If Aljo wins, things get very cloudy because then you have potentially a vacant title.
2 spots.
And then you have guys like Merab and Cory, and then you have maybe even like the winner of Marlon Vera, Pedro Munoz. That's also on that card. You still have Cejudo in the mix. Obviously, Peter Yan. These are guys that probably need to win one to get back in there. But with this showing that we got, and being that Dana White left, dull fight, all that, where do you see him fitting into the possible scenarios here depending on who wins that main event in 2 weeks?
I know. I mean, I feel like if you just look at that resume and down these wins, Song Yudong, Marlon Vera, Rob Font, 3-fight win streak, bouncing back, he's there. The performance does not help him. It doesn't help, like you just said, when Dana walks out. So he said he's going to be in Boston and that he wants next. And I'm not going to bat an eye if he gets it. I honestly hope he does get it. If you look down the line here, he has put together the win streak that no one else besides Merab has done, to be quite truthful, since Sean is up next fighting. So I hope he does get it, this fight aside, but I have a hard time thinking that he will. Henry Cejudo, as such, came out since last night, pushed a little video on Twitter I saw right before we hopped in the studio of him making fun of the fight while he was watching it last night, saying, oh, now it's definitely me versus Merab. Winner gets the title fight. And I could very well see that as a possibility. And therefore, maybe Cory has to fight one more time. So I feel like those are basically the only 2 options. And you're right. If Aljo wins and immediately vacates, it does change things a little because there's not 1 spot available for a contender. There's 2 spots available. So that's where it could change, I guess, a little bit. But I think Cory can, but probably won't after last night.
Man,
and
I understand that some of the body language or some of the actions we saw do not bode well. Dana walking out, the boos.
Yeah,
I get it. It doesn't look great,
and just injury in general, maybe even too.
Well, sure, yeah, that's a fair point. I'm going to put that aside. So I'm going to do this as if we're not thinking about how long he may be out with an injury here, because we do have a title fight in 2 weeks. So we're not talking about turning a guy around right away. If Aljo wins in 2 weeks, I think it should be pretty straightforward. It should be Merab versus Cory Sandhagen.
Vacant belt, yeah.
And I tend to believe that's what's going to happen. I understand, again, all the implications of what we saw Saturday. But we're talking 1 fight here.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of recency bias that's kind of going into, and this is natural because it's the last thing we saw. You know, you always hear that motto in MMA, you're only as good as your last fight. When Sandhagen blew through Chito Vera, he was he was back. He's the guy. He's next. He called out Merab afterwards. I mean, people were loving this guy. Now all of a sudden he's the most boring fighter in the world and he sucks and he should be cut and he should not get a title fight off of this. I hope that the brass of the UFC recognize that at the end of the day, he did take this fight with an injury. He still dominated. I mean, to put blame on him for something that Rob Font could not stop seems strange. And again, I'm not saying that Rob Font should be punished for this. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, he found something that worked and continued going to it. I feel like that's MMA for you. That's what you do. Don't have to think it's entertaining, but I'm just saying that that's how it went this time. So I think if Aljo wins, pretty clear. If Sean O'Malley wins, then I think you're looking at Cory having to fight one more fight. And I think Merab would be the most likely next title challenger. It seems like Cory, you're right. This fight did not help his chances, like help his standing in that title picture. And the only reason I say that is because I think if he had done had enough of a powerful showing, blew through Rob Font like early, highlight reel, KO, whatever, I think he could have passed Merab as being like that, no doubt, number one guy. As it stands, I feel like Merab has edged him out, at least right now.
Yeah. I definitely like that. If Sean wins, I think Merab is for sure.
That's how it feels to me.
Yeah.
You kind of have a little bit of a story there. Maybe
Yeah,
they
you
fight
do.
for the jacket too. I don't know.
Merab can avenge Aljo.
I do think that maybe in a couple weeks, once we're off, we're already going to move into Luke RDA, and then we're going to get to that Boston card. Sandhagen will be there.
Yep.
I think a lot of this will be forgotten in a couple weeks. I think
hope
it'll
so.
blow over a little bit. Maybe Dana will have some sour grapes about the performance, but you never really know with him, so it's hard for me to predict. I just think that it would be a bad precedent to set if you're going to punish someone who really kind of bent over backwards to make a fight happen for you.
He really did. Yeah.
I think the UFC would be setting a pretty bad precedent to punish someone who did that. Tatiana Suarez gets the second round submission over to former strawweight champion Jessica Andrade. This was Suarez's second fight back since her long layoff, but it was her first at the division that she dominated previously, strawweight. She dominates. I guess you could say dominates. I mean, she won pretty clearly.
It was pretty clean.
The whole fight.
Yeah,
it was a clean performance. Second round submission over Andrade. You've obviously been a big ride or die with Tatiana. You thought if not for the layoff, she would have already been champion, probably still champion, I believe you even said last night. Now that you've seen two performances from her, how much of that Tatiana of 2019 is still there in your opinion?
Oh, now 2 fights in, more and more of it is coming back to me as a fan. It was great to see her come back to get into the cage at 125 back in February and beat Montana, but now she didn't kind of take that similar approach to her 115 re-debut. She jumped right into the deep end of the pool with former champion Jessica Andrade, number 5 in the world, and did well, albeit on the feet as well. Looked pretty clean, utilized range because she was a lot bigger, much bigger, especially in person, getting to see that than what Jessica was. Not that she had any big moments, but she did well on the feet. And that's where I was wanting to see how she would perform with someone as powerful as Jessica. And man, her grappling is so good in the female divisions for the UFC right now. The way that she can transition, the way that she set up that submission in the second round, kept the headlock, kind of let Jessica get up, and in a way rearranged her hands, brought her right back down straight into the guillotine. It was nasty. She's an elite level grappler, wrestler for this division. And last night I immediately wanted to jump as soon as she won, and I'm like, she's back. I think she can get a title fight. I really do think she can. But now, 24 hours removed, well, I would love to see that for her. I actually would like to see her just get one more in. Just to let's really solidify here that she's back, she's healthy. Get her in at maybe December. That'd be a 3-fight year, tons of activity for her. Start 2024 fresh. And I think I would like to see her take on Yan Xiaonan. That's what I think I would want. After sleeping on it and getting all day today, that's what I'm feeling here. I love what I'm seeing from her. I truly believe she's going to hold that title still, even with all this injuries and the layoffs that she's had. She's going to be a champion, and I think it will be coming in the somewhat near future. But I want one more to really solidify it here, Noah. I know you kind of maybe feel a little bit different about the performance, but I think that's why it's going to be interesting to see how we end up viewing her at the end of this discussion.
It's interesting because I would say when I look at the performance, it's very clean. Like, she didn't really get hit with anything substantial. She dominated on the ground when she had her there. Yeah, Jessica was able to get back to her feet in round 1, which I thought could play a factor into rounds 2 and 3. It seemed like Jessica did not come out with that same level of aggression that she normally does, and that might have been for her own good at the time because when she comes in so reckless, Tatiana could probably, if she doesn't take a clean shot, could probably take her down pretty easily. But it felt like Andrade was giving her a ton of respect here. Did not put her foot on the gas too much. And Tatiana, it took her some time to kind of, like, she seemed fully comfortable on the feet in round 1, but then round 2, I felt like maybe it was starting to feel like she was a little uncomfortable staying there.
Yeah, she was kind of rushing a little, it felt
A
like.
little bit. That's why I was kind of wondering if maybe that the tide was starting to turn and maybe Andrade would start landing, but then that's when Tatiana took her down and got the submission, so we'll never know. So, I mean, it's 2 straight fights being back, 2 straight finishes, 2 straight submissions. I feel like I'm nitpicking at a certain point. She was a special talent when she went on her layoff, and she comes back, and I think she still has the makings to be a special talent and a champion. But you're right. I'm not ready to throw her into a title fight yet. I'd like to see her take one more. And I'm going to present just an alternative option because I think the Zhao Nan fight makes a lot of sense. I like it. I'm going to throw out Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah, talked about that
The
in the car.
Mackenzie Dern fight stylistically is the most interesting fight you can make in the entire division for either of those two. We saw how rejuvenated Mackenzie Dern looked in her last outing against Angela Hill.
Yeah.
Obviously, Angela Hill, despite her record in the UFC, despite where she might sit in the division, a tough out for anybody. Tough to make her look like that. And Mackenzie Dern dominated her for the majority of the fight. She came out this new level of aggression. Divorced Dern is an animal.
Yeah.
And I mix that with her exceptional jiu-jitsu. You have someone in Tatiana who's going to look to wrestle. And I think you get the makings of a very interesting grappling exchanges. I'd be curious to see who wins that fight on the feet even.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that could be answered there. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern being ranked number 7, maybe that feels like she shouldn't be fighting back. But I don't really care about the ranking numbers. Like, who's got the momentum? Like Mackenzie Dern feels like if you're going off of the momentum, off of who's riding the highest, she's in that top 5 mix right now. So that's the fight I'd like to see. Shout out to Tatiana. I think this fight was an even better performance from her than what we saw against Montana. And I hope that she sticks it out with 115, sees how far she can take it.
Yeah, and do you also see any concern with the 3-fight skid of Jessica Andrade just quickly? Is there any of that for you?
It's a good question. It's just crazy how fast this sport moves, Dominic, because we are 7 months. I think Aaron Bronstetter tweeted this out. We are like 7 months removed from her dominant win over Lauren Murphy in January. Since then, she has fought 3 more times and has lost and has been pretty cleanly beaten in every one of them. Is it concerning? Yes, if you're looking at Andrade like I was, as someone who is still in the title mix, still of the elite of both divisions. Now it feels like she's sort of becoming a gatekeeper. That's sort of what it kind of feels like to me. It sort of feel like she's put herself in this position now where the UFC are going to put the women at 115 or 125 that they believe are ready to kind of move into the title discussion. They're going to try to use her as the former champion, that name to beat, and then move into the title mix. So it's unfortunate because she's been wanting to just stay active. She's just said yes to every matchup, obviously, because none of these matchups have been particularly good for her. Especially the Suarez and Blanchfield ones. Like, that's just some of the worst matchups you can get. And she's definitely between a rock and a hard place right now. But it wouldn't surprise me if she gets one more in before the end of the year.
Oh yeah, she definitely will.
She may just, depending on who they give her, she may just dominate.
Yeah,
I'd be curious to see how she would look against someone like Virna Jandiroba.
Be a fun
6.
scrap. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if she's going to bounce back up to 125. I don't know what she's going to do, but someone like Virna, that'd be fun. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No. I like where we end there.
Do you want to just we can quickly kind of go over that 3-fight span where we got all quick finishes, right? Well, two. Sorry, we
Two
just
more.
talked about one. Dustin Jacoby, first round TKO over Kennedy Nzechukwu, came 1:22 into round number 1. And how about Diego Lopes, Dominic, in his sophomore effort in the UFC, gets the first round submission 1:38 in over Gavin Tucker. Gavin Tucker, shout out to him, by the way. Dude we haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
Tough way to go out, but nice to see him back. And Dominic, Diego Lopes seems like a guy to be on the lookout for, because did you hear the kind of reaction we got from the crowd?
Yeah.
And you mix that in with how he's looked. Of course, he's the guy who in his debut went on short notice against Movsar Evloev, the undefeated
and it was a scrap.
And it was a scrap. Diego was in that fight.
Yeah.
I mean, he took it on how many days notice did he take it on? It was like a week.
It was within a week. And Movsar, he almost beat the undefeated.
Yeah. Nobody had really shown anything
against
Movsar. And Diego nearly beat him. It was incredible. And then he comes in here against Gavin Tucker.
Oh.
Makes very quick work of him. Nasty armbar. He kind of started with the flying triangle, right? And then he turned it into the armbar.
Yeah.
Or he had the triangle locked in, but then he took the arm and did the armbar.
Yeah, they said it was the 11th triangle armbar in UFC history last night.
Oh, I guess you'd call it a triangle armbar. Okay. Well, this just shows my white belt here, energy.
It's all right. You got your first match this weekend. It's fine.
Well, I'm reading on Wikipedia too, and it just says armbar submission. So I'm just whatever. But the reaction I saw for Diego, man, I was like, okay, this guy feels like we could have something here. It's too early to tell. It's going to take a few more fights, a few more wins to really know. But this was not your normal crowd reaction for a guy making his second effort in the UFC.
Yeah. Big guy too, good size, obviously good.
He looked so much bigger than Gavin Tucker.
Yeah. It's a shame for Gavin. This kind of the skid, the lack of fighting, and now the losing streak as well. And he's like 37 now, I think Nova even mentioned. So it's interesting for him. But Diego Lopes was probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, takeaway of the show in terms of performance. The place went nuts being there in person.
Yeah, and then that Dustin Jacoby TKO over Kennedy Nzechukwu, that was a big win for him. He needed it. I think this kind of firmly puts him back in like that number 16, 17 range at light heavyweight. He obviously lost his spot after he got pieced up pretty good by Azamat Murzakanov. He said he wants a fight in a ranked fighter. He called out Volkan Oezdemir. I don't mind that matchup.
I really liked it. Yeah.
I think that's a good call out. It's a good shout. I don't know if Volkan has a matchup currently. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know. But he seems like one of those guys that could just have a fight and we just wouldn't know. But I'm going to guess not. So if not, I would love to see that fight happen around the beginning of next year, maybe even into this year. That'd be a solid fight to make next. Did you think the finish was a little early on Kennedy?
Yeah, it's one of those, right? And we were kind of talking when it happened last night. He was landing the ground and pound, and of course, the second the ref goes to stop, Kennedy is trying to grab a hold of Dustin's leg, so it looks bad. I mean, maybe let it go a little bit longer. I can see that argument for sure. But, man, I don't envy that job at all. The split-second decisions that some of these refs have to make, that was a nasty straight shot that dropped Kennedy. He was clearly hurt. I can see the argument, but I'm okay with it being a stoppage.
I think it's just like your room for error. It's like, I mean, in hindsight, would I let it go on? Probably at least for a little bit longer. But in the moment, it's right when Gary Copeland jumps in that Kennedy starts actually looking to grab a leg and try to keep himself going. Shout out to Gary Copeland, by the way, my stepdad's former boss. So that's a little fun fact for you guys. I've just always had this connection to MMA in some way. So anything else you want to go over on this card, Dominic? Obviously, we had some bangers on the prelims too.
And we always knew that Billy Q and Damon Jackson was going to be fun, right? I mean, come on, man.
But
The
what a
fact that it went
weird way to
15
get
minutes
there.
is
What a
such a treat.
weird way to get there, man. This fight was weird in
Mm-hmm.
like the best way possible. Can we talk about how Damon Jackson was just piecing up Billy Q in round one?
Damon said,
I
"Forget the
mean,
submissions, dude." In the first
dude,
round.
I'm watching it and I'm like, I felt like Billy had a rough round one. I just
No,
felt
he
like he
did.
did. I thought he didn't look good.
Mm.
Thought he looked sluggish. He looked slow. His defense was, I mean, not that he's ever been that defensively strong, but against Damon Jackson, who's not
Mm.
known as a striker, and Jackson just kept, I mean, he was spamming the right hand and
Yeah.
Billy just kept eating it. Now, luckily for Billy, he's got a hell of a chin and it has not been wore down by Edson Barboza knocking
Yeah.
him out. So Billy came back in rounds 2 and 3, and it became a battle of attrition. It became this who can take more punishment type slugfest, and Billy
Mm.
Q thrives in that environment.
He does. Yeah.
Damon Jackson tried his damnedest, but unfortunately for him, he just couldn't quite take at the punishment Billy was dishing to him
The
like
body
Billy
shots,
could
dude.
take. Yeah, the body
Whew.
shots started to add up. It felt like it came out of nowhere too when Damon was just like compromised.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seemed
Yeah.
like Damon was fully in control, and then like one body shot, and all of a sudden he's kind of wobbly up against the fence. I'm like, wait a minute, this fight has turned.
Yeah.
But man, the legend of Billy Q. I love that guy. I love Damon Jackson too. That's 3 losses in a row for him, by the way.
Mm. Mm.
And I
Yeah.
hate to
Dan
see that
Ige.
because I think he's very talented.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the guy. He has a solid record. I mean, look at you. Aside from Billy, Dan Ige, he loses to Ilya Topuria. He even lost to Movlid Haibulaev in the PFL. Like the guy has fought legitimate competition, and
He's
even
fought
his
nothing but
wins.
killers, dude.
Yes, and his wins in the UFC. I mean, he beat Pat Sabatini for. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
win. And Camilla Kirk. I mean, he has solid competition. He's in very fun fights. Billy Q is always in very fun fights. Both these guys still have plenty of good scraps to offer in the future.
Let's keep Damon around, please.
We
I
have
mean,
to.
come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess I'll mention the craziness we got in Cody Durden and Jake Hadley.
That second round was absolutely insane.
I gotta just let the people know how I watched this fight. By the way, it was not under normal circumstances. Obviously, I'm in the arena, right?
Yeah.
I had to pee bad. So at the end, as soon as the scorecards were read off for Sean Woodson, Dennis Bazooka, I book it to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, long ass line.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Long
It's the end
lines
of
for
a
the
fight.
bathroom breaks.
So I see 2 lines for what I assume to be 2 different men's restrooms. Why are they right next to each other? I'm not thinking about that. I got a bladder full of pee, guys.
New arena. Yeah. You know.
I'm just trying to get it out. So I get in the one in the back, like the one that looks a little smaller. I'm waiting, and it gets to the beginning of round 1 of Durden Hadley, and I'm like, damn, like we're still quite a bit away from using this bathroom. And I look at the other line, and it's like died down pretty quickly. And then people from my line start going over to that line. Well, Dominic, it's at this moment I realized I fucked up, and that me and our buddy Jake were waiting to use a handicap accessible bathroom, which means
Yeah.
it's a single use
Yeah.
bathroom. So one person out, one person in. While
Yeah.
the other bathroom is just like, I mean, it's an assembly line of people
Yeah.
coming through there. So I essentially watched that entire fight on my phone while waiting to go into the bathroom. I think I then walked to get a refill on my refillable cup
Mhm.
and watched the round 3 from like a TV monitor that they had by the food area. So compromised experience, but you know, a wild fight for sure. I
Yeah.
hated that I had to kind of miss that one out of all of them, but yeah, how was it watching it like with the people, Dominic? I mean, Durden
Yeah.
to fight out of that submission to
Yeah,
it
dude.
seemed like he was really playing up to the crowd a little bit. It seemed like
Mm.
these two really didn't like each other. Felt just a nice little addition on this prelims to have that kind of, you know, emotion added to this fight.
It feels good when both flyweight fights that happened on this card got the crowd going.
Yeah.
Asu made a great debut and beat Ode, submitted him, and then Cody Durden got the crowd going. He's actually on quite of a tear right now himself. It's kind of, sneaking by, but
Yeah.
he's been winning a lot of
Yep.
fights. This was not an easy one. The second round, man, the whole arena. Shout out to Nashville, by the way, watching the prelims, as Noah's shirt said last night. Big crowd there, and they deserved it. The way that they both had to escape super compromising submission attempts had everybody on the edge of their seat, people oohing and on. I was looking at Savannah in our row, kind of freaking out with her, like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. But it was just incredible, a great atmosphere. The flyweights continue week in and week out to deliver.
That was a beautiful sentiment there. Anything else you'd like to say for the rest?
We head to Dallas, Texas.
Yep. And he rode in on a tank, Dominic. That's right. Like the headline says, Jake Paul ultimately gets to win over Nate Diaz in their boxing matchup. Me and Dominic did get to catch this fight, surprisingly. We walked straight to the closest bar to the arena that my mom and stepdad just so happened to be at. Don't ask why my mom and stepdad were in Nashville while I was in Nashville, but we didn't go together.
Everybody was in Nashville.
Yeah, it's a long story. They were in Nashville too, but we met up with them. We get in there. I pull it up on my phone right as the main event starting.
Yes.
So we get to watch the whole thing. Obviously, no commentary, no sound.
Yeah.
We're
phone
trying
propped up on the bar.
We're dealing with my drunk parents, so we're kind of talking and watching. So I'm not going to
live band.
Really, we're not. I don't know if it's really worth it to talk too much about the fight itself, but maybe more so the implications and what's next, right? Jake Paul did ride in on a freaking tank. He dropped Nate Diaz in round 5, I think it was.
Clean shot right on the back of the ear.
Clean shot. It was a tough knockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Nate was not able to catch himself, so he kind of face planted a little bit. Nate seemed to come back in the later rounds from what I saw online. Seemed like the dirty boxing was working for him, just kind of getting up close and peppering Jake with shots. Sort of what Nate does in general with his stand-up. But ultimately, Jake gets to win, I guess, for Nate Diaz, Dominic, because that's really why we're talking about this in the first place. Did this fight end up doing what we feared it might and hurt his chances of making that return to MMA that he wants to do, to perhaps return to the UFC and maybe finish that trilogy with Conor McGregor?
Honestly, Noah, I don't think it really hurt him at all, because in typical Nate Diaz fashion, even in a losing effort, he comes out the winner because of one picture that gets taken, one moment in round number 9. He locks Jake Paul into a standing guillotine before the ref can separate them apart. And that's all I see people talking about. I'm not seeing people talk about Jake Paul winning by a decision or even the knockdown. It's Nate Diaz doing what Nate Diaz does. And it's putting that picture with, the bloody face picture that he had and pointing at Leon, all those moments. Nate delivered it here again. He looked a little bit slow, especially early on. I feel like the later the fight went, he kind of flowed a little bit better. Again, we're not breaking down the X's and O's of that fight, but I think he showed enough to where he'll get to do something. Whether it is come back to the UFC and fight Conor, because we called it. Conor was tweeting like a motherfucker about this whole entire fight, about Jake, about Nate, and let's not forget the other potential thing, and it's that Jake Paul seems to really be wanting to do this MMA fight in their second bout with Nate in the PFL next year. So I think we're going to see Nate in some shape or form, I should say, competing again in 2024.
Well, let me ask you this, just to continue that. I mean, those seem like the two biggest options, right? Conor in the UFC, Jake in MMA in the PFL. Which one's more realistic, Dominic? As his next fight, which one do you think has a better chance of happening?
Jake Paul, PFL Super Fight Division 2024.
Dude, is it crazy that I sort of agree with you?
I think it's going to happen.
I legitimately I can't put much stake in any Conor fight ever happening.
Yeah.
After all of this mess that's happened with the Michael Chandler situation, I just can't buy it. And I don't really think either one of these is going to happen next, if I'm being truthful? Because the way you presented it, that makes me think you think that fight is going to happen.
It's happening. Yeah.
So you really believe that's going to happen? That's next. PFL.
Main event: Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. Co-main: Jake Paul, Nate Diaz. PFL super fight.
Oh, the PFL, man, that would be massive.
Oh man, wouldn't it?
Woo. However, I was shocked to see how much Nate seemed to just not be interested in doing that. He said, "I don't fight for them." For a guy who, and I saw Ariel talk about this a little bit on, and the boys talk about it on the Ringer MMA show. Nate really built his name and his career off being kind of he was sort of like, he kind of went against the grain in the UFC. He didn't really play by their rules. He's on his way out when he fought Tony. He's got the Rock shoes on. He's saying "fuck these shoes" on the broadcast and whatnot. Like, he's always done that kind of shit, right? Where he doesn't, he's not a guy that can be controlled and all this stuff, right? He's just gonna do what he wants to do. And then in the build-up for what we saw here, just from the snippets I saw on Twitter and whatnot, seemed like he, more often than not, sort of was giving a lot of praise to the UFC and even talking about how much he wanted to go back.
Yeah.
When asked about the PFL and the $10 million offer that they had made and Jake had made, he said, "I don't fight for them." Maybe it's negotiating tactics, but I don't know. Like, I didn't see, if it's really negotiating tactics, why wouldn't he do it both ways? Why does he seem so enamored with going back to the UFC and expressing that? I find it hard to believe that he might be doing this to try to get the PFL to give him more money when why wouldn't he be doing that to the UFC? Instead, he seems to be just willingly going to take whatever they give him.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like the Derek Lewis conversation we had where he's a free agent. There's a huge fight there with Francis, and yet it feels like he wants to stay with the UFC, show his loyalty to the brand. And in a similar sense, it's kind of like that. So it'd be crazy if both did jump ship to go to the PFL. But I don't know, man. Like, I'd love to see that trilogy happen. Even at this point, Nate and Connor, it feels like it just needs to happen. But it's crazy when I think it's more realistic that Nate Diaz MMA fights Jake Paul first in the PFL over that. That's what a wild world this sport is.
I feel like if Nate, what I think, if you made me predict right now what Nate Diaz does next, very hard thing to do. The guy is very unpredictable, as are the people that he is potentially being tied to. Conor McGregor, Jake Paul. I mean, they're all bound to change their minds. I will believe we will see next from him is he re-signed with the UFC, fight Dustin Poirier at 170 pounds.
Yeah, I kind of felt like that's what you were gonna go with, and okay.
And I kind of hate to say it, and the reason I hate it is not because I don't hate. I like the fight. I hate it because a week ago, I felt like I already matchmade for Poirier, and I did not mention Nate Diaz one time. Like, I hate how much I find myself like
this sport moves too fast,
week over week.
Yeah,
but I saw Dustin's tweet saying, "Okay, I'll move up." Maybe he's just being cheeky with it. Whatever, that's fine. Yeah. But I could see the UFC to try to entice Nate to come back, to keep him away from the PFL, give him that kind of fight that he was wanting to have when they wouldn't give it to him, when they were trying to force him into the Hamza fight and whatnot. The Dustin Poirier fight was the one everybody wanted to see. I don't think they'll be able to give him the Conor fight. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. If it hasn't happened now, why would it happen now?
Yeah, good point.
Why wouldn't it have happened when he fought Cowboy Cerrone? Conor, that is.
Yeah.
Why is it now? Like, why now would it happen if it hasn't happened yet? That's just what I'm turning into with Conor. It's like, feels like it's just going to be random. One day we're just going to get a Conor announcement. It's going to be out of nowhere. It's not going to be because we saw a tweet that said, "Hey, I'm going to fight Nate," or "I'm going to fight Justin," or whatever. It's just going to be one day. It's just finally going to happen.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Did we see the end of Jake Paul versus MMA here, or do you think he
In
continues in?
boxing or just in general? Because I
Well,
guess
just the storyline, because I guess it is Jake Paul versus MMA in boxing, but do you think that storyline continues when he moves into MMA?
honestly, I didn't feel like. I mean, yes, this was boxing versus MMA, or influencer versus MMA, however you want to view it. This fight, but I don't feel like that was the narrative about this fight.
Hmm.
Like it kind of snuck up on us even on Friday. It was here, it happened. Seemed like a big deal during Saturday and post
Yeah.
fight, obviously, why we're talking about it. But I don't know, like the narrative's kind of ran its course. Can he fight someone else from MMA? I'm sure he can, but I don't know. I feel like the buzz for this was not where they probably anticipated it to be. Maybe if he does get Nate to the PFL and somehow beats him in an MMA fight, everything ramps up again. But
Hmm.
I feel like I would need to see that happen first. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I guess kind of right now it's ran its course with me.
Okay. Fair. Let's move on to the fight announcements. Just a couple here. Had to put this on here for our flyweights. Tatsuro Taira looks to go 5-0 in the UFC against David Dvorak.
His chance to enter the
October
rankings.
14th.
Mhm.
October 14th, UFC Fight Night. I believe that'll be at the Apex. That's also the same day as my sister's birthday. So shout out to
Mm.
Macy. Also, Dominic, we have a middleweight title fight, it appears. This comes from Spinning Back Fist. Apparently, there's still a few details to be worked out before it's made official, but we'll go ahead and talk about it as if it is. Israel Adesanya will likely be defending that middleweight title against Sean Strickland on September 9th, UFC 293. I know that's probably where most of our attention is going to go, Dominic, but I'll just open the floor to you to give your thoughts on either one of these fights.
Well, quickly, for those that probably still don't know, and I'm sure there's a lot that don't, Tatsuro Taira is about as legit a prospect you're probably going to find right now at the men's flyweight divisions across the entire sport, across all the
Mhm.
promotions. He is very legitimate. David Dvorak is a great challenge to welcome him into the top 15. I look forward to see if he can kind of answer the call.
Let me just say in response to that he is very legit and we've been very excited about him. Shout out to one of our commenters who
Yes.
actually kind of told us about him before we even knew, Vispian.
Hmm.
However, I do think his last fight raised some questions, Tyra,
Sure.
about, kind of his stand-up ability. We know how exceptional he is on the ground. I don't think this fight's going to be where we get those answers, David Dvorak, but I do think David Dvorak is a solid test for him as he continues to move up the ladder.
Yes, absolutely. And Izzy Sean is I, I don't even know what you're really supposed to say about this fight.
Is
It's
it a
going to be,
compelling fight or is it more of a compelling build up to a fight?
I think it's definitely more of a compelling slash ugly buildup for sure. It's going to be just weird. It's going to be crazy. No
Mm,
telling what's going to happen. The fight itself, I have a hard time seeing how Sean can win, to be quite honest. But I'm interested because if he can somehow win, Sean Strickland's a UFC champion, and the world's not ready for Sean Strickland to be a UFC champion. So that's the intrigue right there.
yeah, you're right. I mean, it's compelling for a lot of the factors not involving the fight itself. I think this fight has a very high possibility of being pretty dull.
Hmm.
Just honest opinion on the whole matter. Sean Strickland's taking this fight on 4 weeks' notice. He already has a style that finds himself in those kind of fights where they can be a little slower. He sort of is just a step ahead, has far more output. I don't foresee that being what happens here against Izzy. I think Izzy will have the higher output, will be more effective, all that stuff. He's just a more credentialed kickboxer and
Hmm.
striker. But I don't really see him finishing Sean Strickland. I don't see Sean. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Sean just goes for broke here because
Hmm.
the UFC, without really another option since Strick has pulled himself out of this potential fight, the UFC still didn't seem all that committed to
Yeah.
giving Sean Strickland that title fight, which kind of tells me that the idea of Sean making his way back to a second title fight just almost impossible.
Yeah.
So maybe he recognizes that and goes for broke here, but that's just never really been what he's shown.
Hmm.
So I've kind of don't see that happening. I don't see him really putting himself in those risky situations to potentially be finished and maybe also finish Izzy. Like I don't really see him going for that. I think he'll stick to his guns and probably get 50-45 or 49-46. Like that's what I think is the most likely scenario here. But at least I think the buildup will be intriguing.
Yeah.
It'll be the fight. The fight, in my opinion, will be on the level of like an Izzy Cannonier, but a much more fun buildup.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, that's probably accurate. And Izzy Cannonier was not great for those that don't
Yeah,
remember. So,
yeah. So I mean,
um,
that's just let's keep our expectations low.
yeah. And then if it exceeds, then
Yeah,
perfect.
because Izzy is fully capable of doing more than that, but
Yeah.
Strickland's gonna have to bring it out of him.
Yeah, for sure.
With that, Dominic, last segment of the day, we are not doing blazing bets. I know we kind of mentioned potentially doing them once we got down to Nashville. Just didn't really happen. We both placed some bets, but we didn't get our bet slip out in time and all that.
Yeah,
So
it was, yeah.
it was just sort of a dead week. We'll pick it back up next week. But that means we go into closing statements, Dominic. The point of the show where me and Dominic can talk about anything and everything, MMA related or not. So, Dominic, any closing statements to send us off into a great, great week?
Yeah, a big week for us too. 3
Mm,
years, new content distribution. What a time. I'm gonna keep it MMA. Quickly, shout outs for the PFL first round playoffs here. Jesus Pinedo pulls off another upset and finishes Bubba Jenkins in the second round. Impa Kasanganai, the former Contender Series alum, the man who was tore all the way down in the UFC, gotten rid of, now has a chance to win $1 million when he faces Josh Silveira. So just a shout out to those guys. I love that story, especially for Impa. We've backed him. We watched him in the Contender Series. Now he has a massive opportunity to put his name in a very upper echelon of guys and change his life for the entire rest of it. So I just love that for them. Jesus Pinedo is one of the biggest underdog stories of the entire year. It's kind of reminiscent of the way that Haush Manfio kind of came up the ranks
mm.
in 2021, except Pinedo is doing it in a much bigger stage and finishing these opponents in very dominant fashion. So I'm excited to see what those two guys do. We get this week off, and then the next 2 weeks start. I don't know why they did it this way, but shout out to those guys and upping their chances for $1 million.
Yeah, definitely didn't mean to not put that on the script. So that's I just I had to put this together. I completely forgot the PFL happened this weekend.
Nashville
So
happened, Noah. It's fine. It's fine.
yeah, so I definitely didn't mean to do that. So I guess closing statements will be where we talk about PFL playoffs.
Yeah.
Dominic, did you notice that before we started recording? Was there a part of you that's like, should I ask, or is
It was one of those moments, yeah.
were you
But then
kind
we
of
kind of
like,
just jumped right into
yeah,
recording, and
we
I,
really did, yeah. But that's okay. We can talk about it now.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess that would be a good closing statement. Yeah, Impa Kazaganai, our boy. You gotta talk about Impa
what a
Kazaganai.
fucking knockout, man.
Yeah, the knockout was incredible. I thought his line when we saw that in Tennessee, I was like, that feels a bit steep. Like Martin
Yeah.
Hamlet's a tough guy in that division, been very solid in that light heavyweight division for PFL. And Impa just ran through him basically. I
Mhm.
think Hamlet got a takedown, I think, early, and then Impa got back to his feet and still finished that fight before the end of the first round.
Yeah.
Also mentioned Josh Silveira. I am, for one, very excited for a light heavyweight finals matchup between Silveira and Kazaganai.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are the two guys that I've been kind of trying to prop up a little bit more than your average person in my position would do. I would consider myself fans of both of them.
Mhm.
Silveira has looked great at times. He's had a couple dull
Yeah.
showings
Yeah.
like he did against Omari Akhmedov, but I think he's hitting his stride here. Impa Kazaganai has had an incredible comeback to just his career after really being known as the guy on the receiving end of the
Yeah.
Joaquin Buckley KO for so long. I think that's a great, compelling final matchup. I can't really say the same for Jesus Pinedo, Gabriel Alves Braga, but the fact that Jesus Pinedo is here
Can you
is
do it
mind
again
blowing.
one more time?
Well, I think if he did it here, I think it'd be the easiest of the three. Am I
You're
crazy?
right. You're right.
Like, I feel like the harder ones were Brendan Loughnane and Bubba Jenkins. Like,
Yeah. He
now
looked
if he
great
doesn't
in
do
this
it, it
fight,
almost
too.
feels like a disappointment. No, I think it's incredible. It's and he looked big. I didn't realize how much bigger he would be than Bubba Jenkins once
Mhm.
they actually started fighting. So yeah, I'm pretty sure on my preview of this fight, I kind of said like I don't really see his chances. He kind of, had a great night, but I
Yeah.
didn't see him really being able to continue that, and he definitely shut my mouth.
Mhm.
So now if he doesn't finish this whole thing and win the million, it'd feel like a disappointment.
He's on his way to the Joey if he keeps this up. No, I mean, come on. This is a lot of pressure here.
I don't know if we can go back to back PFL Joeys considering our success rate.
Yeah, then Pinedo's screwed next year. So.
Yeah. But my name's Noah Baker. That's Dominic Slee. We are but just two of the below average Joes, and we'll see you guys when we see you, I guess.